Good morning. I have two star pupils who have decided to get up early on a Friday morning and join me for a makeup lecture. So kudos to you guys. And hopefully there will be more people who will be joining us and watching the recording. How are you guys doing this morning?
Good.
I've been kind of having a rough week a little bit. This election's been stressing me the hell out. I'm not going to lie. I'm trying to let it go, but just people are so on edge about this. And I'm one of them. Although I'm not one of these crazy people, holding a gun trying to get into a vote counting facility, right? But regardless of what your political affiliation may be, you got to admit that this is, just fiasco, right? Just a giant national fiasco. The other thing I wanted to touch on, good to see some more folks joining us. I wanted to touch on, what was I going to say? Oh, your grades on your second exam. I did get those graded like this morning, actually, about an hour ago. So you should see a grade for your second exam. Keep in mind, as I said earlier in the course, for those of you who may have, and I'm not talking to anybody here necessarily, I'm also talking to people who might be watching the recording too, so don't think I'm talking about you. But for anybody here who may have made a grade that they're not so happy with on this exam, I will be providing an opportunity here later in this semester. I will have a day or a time period. It might be longer than one day, but I'll have a time window in which I will allow people who want to retake their lowest exam. I'm going to be allowing folks to retake their lowest exam, right? And that's going to be happening later on. I think some of you actually did better on this exam than on the first, but yeah, Sol?
You still are grading the first essays, correct?
Second essays, I thought.
Okay, then I have a question.
Sure, I thought I had graded did I not grade your first essay?
Well, no, it just says, can you see that? I don't mind showing.
I can't see it too well. Can you read it to me?
Okay, so it says essay assignment 1, it says the due September 9th, and then under it, it says late, but it also says 100. So I'm confused. It says a great grade, but in red letters, it says late. So
on the first essays, I waived all the late penalties because of the hurricane.
Oh, I turned it in online, but I guess it just says late for some reason, but the grade is fine. I was just wondering, sorry.
It sounds like, I don't know, I'll have to look into it, but I did waive late penalties on the first essay because of the craziness around hurricane.
Oh, well, it just went away.
So I don't know why it says yours was late if you didn't turn it in late. It might be due date misentered. I'll have to take a look at it, but
other than that, it's fine. It's good.
Cool. I remember enjoying reading it. I get a lot of essays, so I get a lot of them, and I try to give you guys meaningful feedback. Sometimes it's difficult to give deep feedback when you have 150 of them to grade, but I do try. Okay, so last time on Wednesday, we watched a movie, the Resilience film, and there is an extra credit opportunity associated with that film, by the way. One person has completed that extra credit opportunity in this section so far. But you guys still have some time to go back and do that if you choose to. It would be like getting 5 points back on an exam.
When is that due again?
Let's see here. I think
November 9th.
I think it was Monday, right?
Yeah, November 9th, I think, yeah.
Yeah, Monday night. I'd like to have that by Monday night. There'll be another extra credit opportunity as well. When the course evals open up, I will be offering 5 points of extra credit to students who complete the course evals. And those are anonymous, but I will be able to see whether you did it or not. So, feel free to be honest about your experience in the course. I know I've been scatterbrained this semester. I'm expecting a little criticism for that. I'm going to own that. I have not kept up with my grading as well as I'd like. I've taken way too long to grade things by my own standard. So I'm expecting a little bit of brutality from a few students, but you know what? That's what happens when you're a professional. When you're a big boy, you just have to suck it up. Yes, ma'am.
Sorry, I just want to get a confirmation on a date before you start. So the extra credit is due Monday, November 9th. And then we don't need to, the next thing that is due after that is quiz 5 on November 16th. I was just making sure there's nothing else that we should be working on, just studying the slides and the videos.
Correct. And SA3 is due at the end of the month.
Okay. Yep. Yeah.
And on that, the topic will be mental health or a topic of your choosing. Did I discuss that already, didn't I? I didn't discuss that? Okay, I did.
No, you did briefly. I'll probably be asking you questions about it in next class.
Yeah, that's fine. Yeah, please do. I welcome that. Does anyone have any other items of concern before we jump into chapter 11? Hopefully I can get through the whole chapter today. That's the plan. So this chapter is sort of a hodgepodge of topics on anti-smoking, anti-obesity. I think there's some stuff in there about avoiding STDs, but the two major topics in the chapter that I think are the most interesting, that most of you guys won't have already, the stuff that you guys won't already know, is the stuff on stress management and the stuff on positive psychology. So I'm not going to be lecturing on why smoking is bad and why obesity is bad and, all the problems associated. I think we're all pretty well familiar with the fact that being obese is bad for you. Smoking is bad for you. Vaping is bad for you. STDs are bad for you. And I'm not trying to be glib by saying these things, but I feel like our effort is most well spent by focusing on the stuff on stress management in this chapter. But I do encourage you to read the entire chapter on your own and absorb the material on smoking cessation and all of that stuff I just talked about on your own. Because the exam items are drawn from a question bank, there's always the chance that, some of those might pop up. So, do read the chapter still, even though I'm not covering every single topic that's discussed in it. So health psychology essentially is what we're talking about in this chapter. Health psychology is the application of psychology to health and well-being. Well-being is just sort of a catch-all term. Some folks don't like this term. I don't know why, but it's the most commonly used term that you'll hear used just as a general term for a positive state of mind and health, right? So well-being is more general than, when we think about health and well-being, they're essentially the same thing. But usually when we talk about health, we're thinking more physical health, right? Like yesterday, for example, I was not feeling well at all, and I made myself a doctor's appointment, actually, which is, I couldn't get it until today, and I'm actually feeling much better today than I felt yesterday, so I'm thinking about canceling the appointment. But yesterday, I almost thought I had COVID, actually. I was feeling so terrible. So maybe I should just go in and get tested just to be safe. But in any case, when we think of health, we often think of, the physical side of things, right? Like not having COVID. But when we talk about well-being, we're targeting a more general positive state of mind. So that includes physical health, but it also includes your emotional state. And so this is a more broad term, basically. The model that has predominantly, the the model that has predominated health psychology is a model of health that's known as the biopsychosocial model. And this is just sort of a continuation of this idea of wellness that I was talking about. In the biopsychosocial model, you consider health not just as a physical, not just as a physical state of the body. It includes that, but it also includes your psychology, your emotional states, mental health, and also your social relationships. So as the slide says, the biopsychosocial model is a model of health that integrates the effects of biological, behavioral, and social factors on health and illness. This model, although it seems kind of intuitive, like it's sort of common sense, because you increasingly hear even a lot more mainstream medical doctors actually referring to it these days, it actually is a bit of a contrast to the traditional medical model, which is also discussed in your text. But when we talk about the traditional medical model, we're talking about a model of health where the doctor is kind of seen as the expert. You go to the doctor, you do what they say, like taking your car in to get fixed, right? I don't know how to, I don't know what's going on under the hood of my car. I'm not a mechanic. I mean, I might, recognize a few of the different parts under there, but I am by no means mechanically inclined. And if my car's not running right, it's under warranty still. So it's going to go to the dealership, and those mechanics are going to do their thing. And if they tell me to do something with my car, I'm going to do it because they know what they're talking about. And I don't know what the hell I'm talking about when it comes to cars, right? Especially mechanics. The old school traditional medical model is kind of like that with health, right? You go to the doctor when you're not feeling well, and the doctor patches you up and sends you on your way. And a lot of people still treat themselves this way. They still operate this way with regard to their health. However, increasingly, the biopsychosocial model has encouraged people to take a more active role in their own health. In addition, it also emphasizes preventative medicine as well, which was a statistic that we saw in the video that we watched last time. If you recall from the Resilience film, there was a statistic that was presented that said something like of the $1.2 trillion, was it 1.2? I can't remember, but of all the trillions of dollars spent every year in the United States on healthcare, only 5% of that money is on preventative medicine, which is a real shame because actually that's where all the benefits are in preventative medicine. I mean, the best way to stay healthy is to avoid getting sick in the first place when possible. Now, of course, if you catch a communicable disease like COVID or the flu or something like that, then the traditional medical model is going to be more coming into play here. But even then, though, you can do things to keep yourself healthier so that when you do catch a contagious disease, it doesn't hit you as hard, right? So even then, the biopsychosocial model still comes into play, right? That's why we've been seeing, folks who are dealing with obesity and other major health issues, smokers, lifestyle factors like that. When they catch COVID-19, their death rate is much higher. And even if they don't die, they have a much harder time with the disease. Right? Former Governor Chris Christie of New Jersey caught COVID a couple months ago, and he's a heavier guy. I mean, let's just be honest, the guy is obese. I'm not saying that to shame him, but he is an obese man. And he went on the news saying that it nearly killed him, right? And probably the only reason he survived was he's a former governor who has access to all the best medical care in the world. Same for Trump. Trump is obese too, and I'm not saying anything about his politics. I'm not getting on that. I'm not going to touch that with a 10-foot pole today. Not this week. But just with regard to his health, right? Trump is an obese man. And if it weren't for the fact that he had been the president of the United States when he caught COVID, it probably could have killed him. Seriously, but he had access to the most state-of-the-art treatments in the world, right? And most of us don't have access to that. But the point is that there are things that we can do to make ourselves healthier so that when we do encounter illness, we're more resilient against it, and that we're less likely to get ill in the first place, right? There are things you can do to reduce your likelihood of cancer, heart disease. With that said, there are people who live very healthy lifestyles who still have heart attacks, still get cancer. There was an Olympic runner once, several years ago, who dropped dead of a heart attack in the middle of the Olympic marathon, right? These things happen, right? So there are no guarantees that, we can prevent ourselves from getting ill. But by living a healthier lifestyle, we drastically reduce our odds of life-threatening illness. So in the biopsychosocial model, there is this emphasis on preventative medicine, and there is an emphasis on the way in which our psychology and our sociology and our biology all conspire together to create our health. And in fact, this chapter, Health and Illness, is also a chapter, although it's slightly different content because it's a sociology course, but we also have a chapter on health and illness in my sociology class, which just speaks more to this point that illness is indeed, in part at least, a social condition. So all of these various domains of our lives work together. Think of something like obesity, for example. I'm not stressing that part of the chapter. Think of being obese or being a smoker, or someone who vapes. Let's say you're trying to quit smoking, or let's say you're trying to quit vaping, or let's say you're trying to lose some weight, but you live with someone who is a heavy smoker, right? Or you live with another person who's also overweight or obese and encourages your unhealthy eating patterns. It's very difficult to change your behavior when you're constantly being exposed to that cue, right? And not to mention the role that socioeconomic status plays in health. Having health insurance or not. How much money you make. Unfortunately, these things can make a difference. Comments, thoughts so far at this point? Has anybody here ever been turned away from a doctor because you didn't have health insurance, or not been able to get the care you need because of some sort of socioeconomic situation? That ever happened to anybody here? It happened to me a few times when I was younger. I wasn't always the professor making bank that I am now, right? Although that's a joke. I'm not really making bank, but I used to be a relatively unemployed young person with no health insurance. I know what it's like. I don't ever want to go back to being in that boat. Yeah, Sol.
Yeah, certain clinics, even when you just want to go get a checkup, they won't accept, or they only accept certain health cares or insurance that you have. So I do understand that.
Yeah, and even if you do have health insurance, it could still be expensive. It's crazy. I was on an antidepressant for a while, a couple of years ago, and thankfully I'm in a place now where I no longer feel like I need to be on it. But I'm pretty open and honest with my students. Maybe I share too much, but I had health insurance. I had my job here at the college. This was a couple of years ago, but I was just going through a rough time, and I had health. I had good health. I have good health insurance, and this was like one of these brand new antidepressants that just came out. Which is like apparently like one of the most effective ones on the market, and Even with my health insurance, I was paying $100 a month for my antidepressant. Crazy, right? And I heard that folks who don't have health insurance have to pay $500 a month for a month's supply of that medication. So, I can certainly relate from the past, but even with health insurance, it doesn't make it perfect. It makes it a lot better, but it still doesn't make it perfect. So when we talk about stress, we're getting more to the psychology side of the biopsychosocial model, although there are obviously sociological and biological components of stress too. Still, the biopsychosocial model applies more than ever to the topic of stress. But this is the topic we're focusing on primarily in this chapter. So essentially, stress occurs when the environment asks more of you than you have to give, essentially. And we all have experienced this. I have been experiencing an incredible amount of stress this semester. Full disclosure, I'm pretty stressed out about how behind I am on grading right now. I'm worried that you guys are going to cream me on my evals. And maybe you will, maybe you won't. And maybe I'll deserve it if you do. But I am at this moment stressed out about that. Although I think I'm managing it pretty well. And I bet you that you guys have some stressors of your own going on. I bet you that a lot of you guys have some stressors going on that make my being behind on grading look like sissy shit, right? So I am by no means asking anyone to feel bad for me, but I have been experiencing stress, as many of you have probably as well, because of, well, it's 2020, right? So a stressor is any event in the environment that asks more of you potentially than you have to give, right? So that could be, a physical event that's threatening to your life, like you're hiking through the woods and you come across a bear that wants to eat you. That's stress. Or it could be being behind on grading essays, right? Now, I'm glad that the stressors that I'm dealing with relate to grading essays and not being chased by a grizzly bear, right? I'd much rather be behind on grading than being chased by a bear. But both of those things are stressors. And I have been experiencing stress responses. In fact, yesterday was a pretty difficult day for me. I was not feeling well at all, and I think a lot of it just had to do with stress. Can anybody relate right now? Anybody stressed out? Am I the only one? Are you stressed out, Clayton?
Election, school, normal things.
Yeah, the election is just, I was saying that before you logged in, or maybe, I don't know if you were here when I said that. I just wanted it to be over. Of course I have a candidate that I preferred, but regardless, I just want it to be over. Of course I hope my candidate wins, but I just want it to be over. I want people to stop being outrageous to each other over politics. I have family members that aren't speaking to me anymore over politics, which is crazy, right? I don't know if anybody can relate to that, but if you're refusing to talk to somebody just because they voted for somebody different than you, but that's where a lot of people are right now, right? There's this division in our country, and I cannot overstate the degree to which it stresses me out, because I'm one of these hippie people that just wants to see everybody get along, right? But it's difficult when people have very different views on how the country should be run. I get that. It's a stressful time. Major life stressors versus daily hassles. So when psychologists who study stress responses talk about this, we usually divide stressors into two categories: major life stressors and daily hassles. And I think these are pretty self-explanatory. Looks like in the top picture, someone's house got burned down. Looks like California, out west somewhere. I used to live out in California. Wildfires are stressful events, let me tell you. I would rather have to deal with hurricanes any day of the week than earthquakes and wildfires. I've dealt with earthquakes and wildfires. I'd rather deal with a hurricane. At least you get a little bit of a warning with a hurricane. You don't get a warning with wildfires or or earthquakes usually. But there you've got a guy whose house is just burned down from a wildfire, and it looks like his entire neighborhood has gone up too. That's a major life stressor. Deaths in the family, death of a spouse, death of a child, divorce, loss of a job. These are major, earth-shaking events in people's lives that if you can get through these things without being stressed, then you are an enlightened Buddhist monk of a sort that I've never met, right? Now, daily hassles, on the other hand, are the things, it's just the everyday BS that we have to put up with on a daily basis that just never ends, right? It's the person at the checkout counter with 3 carts full of groceries, not letting the people with a basket go ahead of them, right? It's the, the work that you're behind on. It's the negative social interactions with coworkers that you don't get along with. Due dates, if you're a student, right? Having to get things turned in by a certain date and not having enough time to do it. All of these things just kind of pile up on you. This is just a list of some events that could be considered stressful. It's not an exhaustive list, but these are kind of ranked in terms of how stressful they are and what health psychologists sometimes refer to as life change units. But you can see here that not even the things that are stressful don't even always have to be considered bad. That's the thing, right? We've got getting married on here. Apparently getting married for a lot of folks is more stressful than getting fired from your job. I've been through both experiences, and for me, getting fired from my job was the more stressful event. But I think maybe this is more true for the bride often, because it's usually the bride that's taking on most of the stress of planning the wedding. Although I tried not to be one of those grooms. I tried to play an active role in the planning, but and Sarah was pretty good about not being a bridezilla, but we had one of my groomsmen fell off the face of the earth a week before the wedding, and we didn't even, we had no idea what happened to him. And he just decided out of nowhere to go hiking on the Appalachian Trail and not tell anybody a week before the wedding. And he forgot that he was a groomsman in my wedding. So I had to find a replacement groomsman like 3 or 4 days before the wedding and get him fitted for a tux. And it was just this whole thing, right? And it was stressful, but it was a lot stressful for Sarah than it was for me. And she was really mad at him. I don't blame her. She has since forgiven him. But he had to get fired as a groomsman. So, but planning a marriage can be pretty stressful, right? Serious argument with an instructor. Thankfully, I've never really had a serious argument with a student. Have I? I don't think so. I'm pretty chill. I'm pretty laid back. The student disagrees with me about something. That's usually not the end of the world for me. Hopefully not for them either. One of the earliest models of stress response was developed by a Swiss physician by the name of Hans Selye. And the idea that he became most known for was this general adaptation syndrome. This is an old model of stress response, back from, I believe Selye did his work in the 60s or 70s, if I'm remembering. Actually, I'm not certain on that, actually. I don't remember what year this, I know it's been a few decades since this model has been around. And I know that it was put out by Hans Selye. But Hans Selye was this Swiss physician who came up with this model of stress response, which says that we basically go through 3 stages of stress response. There is an alarm stage in which you mobilize. So this is when your fight or flight response gets activated. Does anybody remember the name of the division of your nervous system that creates your fight or flight response? Sympathetic nervous system, right? So the alarm stage is when your sympathetic nervous system activates. You start to get an adrenaline release. You start to get a cortisol release. Adrenaline and cortisol are the two. Cortisol is also known as corticosteroid, by the way. Corticosteroid hormones. So if you ever see the term corticosteroid hormones listed in a medical textbook, that's just another term for cortisols, right? There are different types of cortisols. But the full term for them are corticosteroid, I believe they're called corticosteroidal hormones, if I'm remembering correctly. But I could be mistaken about that full pronunciation. But cortisols and adrenaline are the 2 major hormones that get rapidly released in your body when you become stressed out. And there's another one called oxytocin that I'll talk about in a minute. But the main 2 are the cortisols and adrenaline and norepinephrine. Those are the major 3. Adrenaline and epinephrine are the same thing, by the way. So when you hear epinephrine and norepinephrine, that's the same thing as adrenaline and noradrenaline. I don't know why we have to have multiple terms for everything in medicine. It just creates confusion. But when you hear epinephrine, that's adrenaline. When you think noradrenaline, when you hear noradrenaline, that's norepinephrine, right? So they're cousins, right? So you've got adrenaline, noradrenaline, and cortisols, which are the major hormones that get released when there is a threat. And this causes the activation of the amygdala, which is the fear center of your limbic system, if you remember from chapter 2. And this mobilizes you to either fight or flee. So traditionally, according to Hans Selye, you have 2 choices when dealing with a stressor. You can either fight or flee. Now, fight or flight works great if you're dealing with some wild animal that's trying to eat you, right? Going back to the example of a grizzly bear, if I'm hiking in the woods and I come across a grizzly bear, which isn't going to happen in these parts. We do have black bears around here. But if I'm hiking in the woods and I come across a bear and it's apparent that that bear wants to end my existence, I'm going to run. I'm going to get away from that bear, or maybe try to make myself really big to scare it away, right? If I think that's going to work. But that's a fight or flight response. Now, what I'm probably not going to do is pull out a knife and try to fight it like Leonardo DiCaprio from The Revenant, right? I'm not that competent in my knife wielding skills. Has anybody seen that movie where Leonardo DiCaprio kills a grizzly bear basically with a pocket knife? Pretty badass movie, actually, but I don't count myself that badass. So I'll let Leo DiCaprio handle fighting bears with pocket knives, and I'll just run. But that's the resistance stage. You're trying to eliminate the threat, basically. And you're going to eliminate the threat or you're not. And if you fail to eliminate the threat, then your body systems will start to break down and you will start to become ill. And that's the exhaustion stage. If we're talking about like chronic stress of modern life. Now, if it's a grizzly bear chasing you and you're not able to successfully eliminate that stressor, then that's it for you. Then you're dead, right? And that's the problem with modern day stressors when you think about it, right? Evolutionarily speaking, our bodies evolved to deal with those sort of stressors, life-threatening stressors. Here's an animal that wants to eat you. Here's a member of a warring tribe that wants to kill you. You know, here's a physical threat to your existence. Or better yet, you're hungry and you need to catch some food, right? You're starving to death, so you need to hunt down some prey to eat. Maybe you're on the other end, right? Maybe you're the predator, right? But in any case, in our evolutionary past, before the modern world existed, there were just basically two possible outcomes. You survive or you don't, right? And that's what our fight or flight system was designed for. It was designed to keep you from getting killed. Hence the dilated pupils, hence the elevated heart rate and the diversion of blood away from your digestive system into your muscles, right? All of that is designed to keep you alive when your life is being physically threatened. So you can either get the hell out of Dodge or eliminate the threat through fighting it. But that's not how modern stressors work. Unless you're in the military and you're in an active combat zone, chances are your physical existence, now this may be different for some people actually who live in really bad neighborhoods. I can't say this for everyone actually, but as a general rule, for most of us, our physical existence is not being threatened very often. It's not very often that there's an actual physical threat to our life. But what kind of stressors do we have to face instead? The sort of things I've been talking about, right? Those daily hassles and those major life events, but they won't quite kill you, right? Getting a divorce won't kill you. Losing your job won't kill you. Well, not immediately, unless it causes you to become homeless and you starve to death, right? But these sorts of stressors that the modern world presents to us are not the sorts of stressors that our bodies are evolved to deal with. And herein lies the problem of the modern world. The sorts of stressors that we are presented with in the modern world are the sorts of stressors that are chronic, ongoing hassles that just wear you down over time, right? They're not going to kill you, not today, not tomorrow, maybe not next week, but one day you're going to have a damn heart attack and die from it, right? If you're someone who's so disposed to cardiovascular illness. So that's the way stress works in the modern world. But our bodies have not evolved to catch up with that rapid social change. Our bodies are still wired for living in a hunter-gatherer society. We have hunter-gatherer brains living in a modern world. And the result of this is that we have a stress response system that is ill-suited to the world that we live in. Anybody have any thoughts, comments on that? Can anybody relate to that? So the General Adaptation Syndrome, or GAS or GAS, was an early model, like I said, that I'm not sure what happened here with this. Can you guys see green highlighting over this? I'm not sure what happened there. Did I do that? Did I just do that? How did I do that?
I'm not sure, but I can see it.
I don't know that's really weird. I must have accidentally done that with my mouse somehow. I don't know what that is. Nope, now it's gone. and I didn't do anything. I think Zoom is drunk. Okay. So this model is old school and it's a little outdated. But one thing that we can get from this is that chronic stress has this way of wearing us down over time. Interestingly enough, though, short-term stressors actually boost your immune system and make you stronger. Long-term stressors wear your immune system down. What do we mean by a short-term stressor? Like a hard workout, right? That's a short-term stressor. Numerous studies have shown, for example, that if you go to the gym and hit it hard for an hour, your immune system is going to be more active for the next couple of days as a result of that. Unless you're ill, of course, right? So if you are, if you are sick with COVID or the flu, obviously don't go to the gym and work out. You need to rest, right? So don't get the wrong message from that. But if you're not sick, what I'm saying is that that those short-term bursts, those short-term stressors actually give you a little immune boost, right? So a good resistance workout with some weights can do it, or a good cardio workout, or a combination of both. I like to combine cardio and strength training, by the way. Circuit training is one of my favorite things to do in the gym. Instead of lifting heavy weight at low reps, what I like to do is lift a little bit lower weight and do higher reps and do like a circuit, right? So, do like 50 curls really fast, and then go do 20 push-ups, and then just go do 20 pull-ups, and you do a circuit, right? And you do them as quickly as you can, and then you like rest for like 3 minutes between each circuit. And you do a few of those circuits, and that will wipe you out. Has anybody here ever tried circuit training? It's a great way to get weight training and cardio at the same time. I highly recommend it. Although I'm big on running too, but I try not to just run because you want to do other things. You don't want to do just the same workout all the time, right? So I do running, I do weights. I like the elliptical. I like to hit the bike sometimes. It's good to have a diversity of things in your workout, but a good workout boosts your immune system. And short-term stressors in general can have this effect. It's the chronic stressors that we're worried about. And unfortunately, we have built ourselves a society and a culture that is built upon chronic stress. It wouldn't function without it, right? So we have to find ways to deal with stress in more healthy ways. I'll come back to that thought in a second, how we deal with stress. Again, so I talked about the fight or flight response a second ago. I just want to linger there for a second. So when we talk about the fight or flight response, this is the sort of stress response that Hans Selye was talking about when he came up with the idea of the general adaptation syndrome, right? You have some threat and you are responding to the threat in a way such as that you're either removing the threat or getting away from it, right? So the fight or flight response is your body mobilizing to do just that. And in this slide, you see that it includes these physiological effects, such as pupil dilation, tunnel vision, vigilance, always looking around your surroundings, right? Shallow, fast breathing, tachycardia, which is just another term for rapid heart rate. Increased sweating, inability to sleep, right? Can even mimic symptoms of ADHD. Remember from the movie last time, the Resilience film, there was the little boy who was acting the fool in school, and his mom brought him into the doctor to get some ADHD meds. And the doctor said, you know what? Your kid does not have ADHD. Your kid is stressed out, right? And I wonder how many children have been misdiagnosed with ADHD. just due to this. It makes me wonder. I'm not saying that all ADHD diagnoses are false, by the way. I'm not one of these people who tries to pretend like ADHD is not real. I know it's real. But I wonder how many folks have been misdiagnosed with it just because they're just having a stress management issue. Something to think about. Now, increasingly, we're hearing a lot more discussion about the hormone oxytocin. Has anybody ever heard of oxytocin before? I may have mentioned it in previous chapters, I can't remember. Oxytocin is also a stress hormone, interestingly, but it's the stress hormone that causes us to seek out social connection. And when it's released, it makes us feel closer to other people. You might think of this as the connection hormone. Numerous studies have shown that oxytocin is released in both the infant and the mother during breastfeeding. And this is, for example, why it is believed that, breastfeeding, if you can do it medically, there are medical reasons not to do it. If those apply to you, don't. But one good reason to breastfeed is because of this oxytocin release. And during breastfeeding, both the infant and the mother experience a surge of oxytocin, which makes them feel emotionally closer to each other. Another time when oxytocin is released in the body? During an orgasm, in both the man and the woman. Again, making the man and the woman feel emotionally closer to each other, right? Oxytocin is also released just when people socially connect with each other in conversation and feel like they're bonding, right? Probably not to the same level that you would get with an orgasm or through breastfeeding, but you still get an oxytocin release just through socially connecting with others. And a sociologist by the name of Shelley Taylor came up with this idea of the tend and befriend response, which is a term for dealing with stress through social support. So, for example, I knew someone I care about a while back that was struggling with homelessness. It was a real sad story. This was a friend of mine who is transgender, and her father disowned her and kicked her out of her home for transitioning, and she became homeless. Now, however you feel about transgender people based upon your religious beliefs or whatever your political views are, I'm not here to debate that. But I just wanted to be there for my friend, right? So I let her come and stay with my wife and I until she could get back on her feet for for a little while, right? That is an example of a tend and befriend response. You're responding to a stressor through seeking social support, right? And the support provided to you by your social network. And interestingly enough, the research suggests that women are more naturally inclined to dealing with stress in this way than men are. This isn't terribly surprising when you think about it. The question is, though, is that biologically based, or is that just a social construct, right? Maybe it's just that we've trained men to suffer in silence, right? Like the cowboy, like the Marlboro Man, Maybe we've just, as a society, trained men not to cry and not to seek help. And you hear increasing discussions about this concept that we call toxic masculinity, which is controversial, by the way, to some folks. But the idea behind this idea of toxic masculinity is this idea in our culture that we've trained men that it's not okay to cry, it's not okay to seek help, it's not okay to say, hey, I'm not okay right now, I need somebody's help. right? It's more socially acceptable for women to do that. So it's not entirely clear as to whether this tendency among women to seek social support more than men is something that's innate. That's just, that's something that women do because that's the way that women are wired. There may be some truth to that too. Or is it just that we've trained men not to cry? What do you guys think? Do you think that women are just naturally more inclined to seek social help because of biology, or do you think it has more a basis in just the way that we've brought men up in our society?
I think it probably has to do with always telling men to man up.
Exactly. I think I tend to agree. Yeah.
Yeah, I agree that it's the man ups, kind of persona men are supposed to have.
Yeah. And I admit I've used the phrase before. I've said it to myself when I've been stressed out. I'm like, dude, you need to man up. And I don't think I was doing anything bad by saying that. But there is just this mentality in our, I mean, it's getting better, actually. This is changing. But there's this sense in which you're somehow less masculine if you seek out help, which is bullshit, by the way. So, unfortunately, when we get stressed out, we often resort to unhealthy means of dealing with that stress, like, comfort food, smoking, illicit drug use, and drinking. All of the behaviors talked about in this chapter as being unhealthy that I'm not going to have time to lecture on that are in the chapter. We all have a tendency to seek out comfort when distressed. And this tendency to seek out comfort when distressed can manifest itself in a negative way, through these negative coping strategies that we're seeing here, as we call them. We refer to these as coping strategies. Genetics seems to play a role too in resilience. Some people just seem to be a little bit more hardy, than others. And that's not an insult to people who are less resilient or less hardy, but it just seems to be that some people, there's some research to suggest that there's biology and environment going on here. And on the biological end, genetically, there just seem to be some folks who are more resistant to stress. Their immune system isn't affected as much by it. We refer to this in psychology as hardiness, by the way. That's the term that the textbook uses. I don't think I have the term in the slides, but it's called hardiness. Hardiness is the term for having an immune system that is resilient against stress. Some people seem to have it, and it seems to be somewhat genetically based. But it also seems like there are things that you can do to improve your hardiness. Do not confuse the term hardiness with resilience, which actually I just did that myself. I just used them interchangeably a second ago. So let me explain the difference between the two terms. Hardiness is more genetically based. Resilience is more something that you can learn, right? So resilience is a set of learned behaviors. You can teach yourself to deal with stress in a more healthy way. But hardiness refers to people who just seem to be born with the ability, if that makes sense. And hardiness exists on a spectrum, on a continuum. Personality plays a role. I grabbed these pictures off the internet when I put these slides together. I thought that these were funny. I thought that these would be a great illustration of the type A behavior pattern. Although I think a more apropos picture these days might be, Trump supporters and Biden supporters riding with each other and fighting each other. I don't know. I'm so sick of that crap. But in any case, people who are type A are folks who are extremely competitive and hostile and impatient and aggressive by disposition. there is an upside to the type A personality. People with type A personalities often tend to be very goal driven and successful in life, right? Because they crush the competition. That's how they're wired, and they're highly motivated people often. I mean, I'm not speaking ill. I mean, I'm a little bit type A myself. I'm not going to lie. I might not seem like it in class, but I think I'm more of a type B personality than I'm type A. But in some domains, in some areas, it's a spectrum, right? Honestly, it's not, the way I look at this, it's not either you're type A or you're type B. It's kind of like a spectrum, right? Some people might be totally type A. Some people might be totally type B. I think there are a lot of us who are kind of on a spectrum in between, right? And I think I'm somewhere in between the two. I can become very type A in certain areas of my life, which my students probably, hopefully, don't get exposed to, because it's not a side of myself that I particularly am proud of. But because I can be an a-hole when I get into that mode. But that's the way type A people act, right? They're just very comfortable acting like an a-hole. You might even think of type a-hole behavior pattern, right? It's a good way to remember it. But, you know, this is this very competitive, hostile, you know, always looking for a conflict, you know, always looking for somebody to disagree with, you know, sort of personality. It's bad for you. There have been numerous bits of research which have illustrated this. So for example, folks who score high on type A traits tend to have more heart attacks than type Bs. They tend to have more strokes. They tend to have more aneurysms. They tend to die earlier, mainly from cardiovascular events like I just listed, right? They're very prone to heart attacks. Basically, these are people that just need to take a chill pill, right? Learn to meditate, calm down a little bit. You know, don't be so competitive and hostile all the time. Not everybody is out to get you. Not everybody is an enemy. As contrasted with the type B pattern, right? You know, so I'd like to think I'm a little bit leaning more towards type B than I am towards type A. But, you know, like I said, I'm somewhere on that continuum. Maybe you guys can relate to that, but these are more laid back people. Yeah, Soul.
So if, say you consider yourself type B behavior, but you have severe anxiety, does that mean that you're like a type A, or does that have nothing to do with being mad or stuff?
Yeah, I would say that you could have an anxiety disorder without being a type A. Yeah, for
Okay.
sure. In fact, I know a lot of people who, I know a lot of people who are definitely type Bs who have anxiety disorders. It's just the anxieties that they have are about different things than what a type A would have.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. Like a type A would get anxiety about someone beating them at something, right? A type B is going to get anxiety about something bad happening to someone they love or something like that. Talk about coping a little bit. So when we talk about coping, of course, we're talking about the way that we deal with stress. The coping process begins with appraisal. So my grandmother who raised me used to be a real estate appraiser before she retired. And what real estate appraisers do is they go around for houses, you know, they go around houses that are for sale and they determine the appropriate selling price of the house, right? So usually they'll get hired by the bank that's selling the house or trying to do the loan on the house, the mortgage, right? And the appraisal will come in and assess the cash value of the home for the bank and for the buyer. So when we talk about appraisal, we're talking about an assessment of value. We're talking about an assessment of whether something good or bad is happening here, right? There's a value judgment going on here when we talk about appraisal. The primary appraisal is the first appraisal that happens in a stress response scenario. This is determining whether or not the event is a stressor. It might not be immediately apparent that an event is actually a good thing or a bad thing, right? Let's say you're working, there's this old Buddhist proverb, right? And I forget the way the whole thing goes, but I'm butchering it. But there's this farmer who, he and his son run the farm, right? And he's an older farmer, so he kind of relies on his son, to get most of the physical labor done these days, right? And then one day, his son is out working the field, and he accidentally gets kicked by a horse and gets his back broken, and he can't walk anymore. He gets permanently paralyzed. Bad event, right? Nobody wants to see their son get permanently paralyzed. But then the next day, a general from the emperor's army comes along. A war has started. And a general comes along and says, "We're recruiting all the able-bodied young men to fight in this war for the emperor. Please give us your son." But then he sees that the son is crippled. And as a result, the son is not killed in the war. And even though he is disabled for the rest of his life, he lives to an old age, and the father doesn't lose his son, right? The moral of the story is that who knows whether an event is good or bad, ultimately, right? Sometimes things that we might think are completely terrible might actually save our lives in the long run. So when we talk about primary appraisal, this is this assessment of, is this ultimately a stressor or not? You may determine that it's not, but you may determine that it is. Once you determine that an event is a stressor, then it is time for the secondary appraisal process. And this is the process by which you determine how you're going to deal with that stressor. This is where you decide how you're going to cope. Are you going to engage in emotion-focused coping? Perhaps it's time to sit down for a meditation session. Calm your mind, get your heart rate down, and deal with your anxiety that way over whatever is going on. That would be a healthy form of emotion-focused coping. Maybe you decide to pray. There has been a lot of research that suggests that having a religious faith can actually be really good for your health, or just any spirituality, really. Maybe you do something less healthy, though, for the emotions. Again, the focus of emotion-focused coping is to deal with the emotions. So you can do this in a healthy way or an unhealthy way. Maybe instead of meditating, you smoke a cigarette, or slam a pint of Jack Daniels, or have a relapse on your drug of choice that you've been clean and sober from for a long time. Whatever it is, right? People turn to substances and sex and gambling and all sorts of impulsive behaviors because they're trying to escape suffering. People who are addicts, they became addicts because they were trying to escape some serious suffering. So they're trying to deal with suffering in a really unhealthy way. So there's a dark side and a bright side to emotion-focused coping, just like many of the topics we talk about in this class. You can go about it in a healthy way. You can go about it in very unhealthy ways. And some problems, this is the way to deal with them, right? There are some things in life that you can't make go away. I cannot make the Starbucks on 9 Mile Road next to Target faster, right? They're really slow there these days, and the lines have been crazy long lately. And I think they've actually been closed for a while now. But that's the Starbucks nearest to where I live. But I always feel my blood pressure go up when I drive up to that Starbucks, because I know especially it's in the morning, I know there's going to be this long ass line, and I'm going to be spending the next 30 minutes of my life just getting my breakfast, right? And I think, is this really worth this? You know, maybe I should make my own coffee and just get a panini press. Yeah, Ms. Dreyfus.
If you keep going down to 9 Mile where that Publix is,
Yeah.
there's another one, and their lines are not that bad.
Good to know. Is that the one down near Pine Forest?
Yep, it's right in front of Walgreens.
I forgot about that one. Thank you for reminding me.
No problem. Sorry.
So yeah. You can deal with problems. What happened to my camera? Okay, there we go. You can deal with problems in unhealthy ways or healthy ways. And for things that, for things that you can't make go away, you don't really have a choice, right? Okay, let's take the election, for example. Let's say the person that you wanted to win loses and it really upsets you. Well, unless there's a violent uprising that overthrows the government of the United States, there's probably not going to be a damn thing that you can do about that. Right? And we don't want that to happen, by the way. So in that case, your best bet is going to be some emotion-focused coping, right? Because you can't do anything about it. Now, some things we can do something about, right? For example, you can go to the other Starbucks down the road, right? That would be an example of problem-focused coping. What can I do to solve this problem? Some problems are solvable, right? And when that's the case, we should turn our attention towards solving those problems. Okay, so that is the end of the section on health psychology. There are 3 slides left that I'm going to have left for you guys to cover from this chapter on Monday. I do want to talk about positive psychology, and I have a TED Talk that I want to play on positive psychology. So this is a great place to stop. The other part of the chapter, just as a preview, positive psychology is the branch of psychology that studies happiness. And it is an emerging area of research that personally, if I were to go into the field and become a researcher, like if I were to leave academia and not teach, and if I were to just do research, this is the area that I would want to work in. I would want to work in positive psychology. This is where it's at for me. But it's all about exploring the factors that make us happier. And this was a field founded by the still living famous psychologist, Martin Seligman, who we will meet next time in his TED Talk on positive psychology. What are your questions? All right, I hope everyone has a great weekend. I hope we can find out who our next president is going to be by the time we see each other again, but I'm not too optimistic about that. I have a feeling this stuff is going to go to the Supreme Court like we saw in 2000. Who here is old enough to remember that? I am. It's a lot of deja vu. Back in the year 2000, you guys do realize that Al Gore and George Bush Jr. tied, right? And the outcome of the election had to be decided by the Supreme Court of the United States, and they sided with Bush. So maybe you remember that?
No, I feel like maybe I remember my dad talking about it, but I was 4, 3.
I was 16. Yeah. I was 16. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, I definitely don't remember it happening, but I feel like I remember at least maybe my grandparents talking about it, but I don't remember it
No,
happening.
it's looking like it might happen again. So, but we'll see. I don't know. I guess Biden was mildly in the lead the last time I checked, but that, it changes every hour apparently. So I don't know. I'll see you guys on Monday. I hope that you guys have a pleasant weekend and live long and prosper.
We don't have
Hey.
class Wednesday, right?
Ah, yes, Veterans Day, right? Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah. So we're going to honor our war veterans and take the day off on Wednesday. All right.
Just making sure.
Yep. I forgot. Thank you for reminding me.
Well, I'll be in a tree stand, so
Oh, you're going to go hunting.
yeah, I'm going to Ohio.
Is it? Oh, it is in season, isn't it? It's
Well, it's in season here too, but it's just not as good.
the pickings aren't as good out here.
No, it's bow season here and there, so I'm gonna fly my bow up there, and the deer are nicer there. So
It's better with a crossbow because you stand less of a chance of poisoning the meat, right?
it really just depends on if you're a good shot or not. Like the first deer that I killed with my bow, I did a bad job. But
Right.
hopefully I'll make a better shot and just like kill it right away this time. So
All right, Katniss. I'll see you guys on Monday.
I do got one
Thanks.
question.
Oh, yeah, Clay.
If I decide to do like my own topic for the paper, do I just email you over the weekend and for you to approve that topic?
Yeah, that'll be fine.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
See you guys later. Yep.
Have a good weekend.
You too.